Welcome everybody to the first class in this expanded Yoga Sutra study. We will start with chapter 1, the Samādhi Pādaḥ. As usual, we would like to acknowledge all the teachers. So I am basing these texts on the commentaries and sub-commentaries of three people especially. And it is Vyasa. Vyasa is the person who wrote the commentary on the Yoga Sutras. This is not Veda Vyasa. So the Vyasa is more used like a title of person who compiles, like a compiler or somebody who organizes. That is the connotation in which it is used. We do not know exactly who this person is. There are two theories. One is that he was Patanjali himself, because in those days there was a style of writing where a person writes the sutras and the same person explains. That's why some people call it Patanjali Yoga Shastra, which means it is a full comprehensive text. So there are the sutras, and then there is a clarification of the sutras, expanding and explain the meaning. So the sutras is a mental, it's aphorism to easily memorize something. So it's transmitted from one generation to another orally. And then the expansion of that is done later by learned people. So some people say it was Patanjali himself who wrote the sutras and also wrote the commentary. Why is that so? The grammar and style of the sutras and the commentaries are remarkably similar. The text probably was a single piece called the Patanjali Yoga Shastra, and later generations split it into two, attributing the sutras to Patanjali and the commentary to Vyasa to just give it more weight. Or another person commented on this, a great person, and therefore it gives validity. That's one theory. The other theory is there was a philosopher named Vindhyavasa, and he wrote the commentary. So we don't know what the reality is. Second person is a stalwart. This person wrote a sub-commentary on Vyasa's commentary. This person is Vachaspati Mishra. So Vach means speech. Vachaspati means the Lord of speech. So it's probably a title given to him, but he is known as a stalwart. The reason is he was incredibly influential and prolific Indian philosopher. I don't know if he's lived in maybe a little after Shankara's time. He is considered a towering figure, and because he is the only person who has written expert sub-commentaries on all 6 darśanas of the Indian philosophical system. And he is known as, therefore, he is known as Sarva Tantra Swatantra. And this is a title which is one of the most prestigious titles. It literally means, Swatantra means sovereign, like a sovereign nation, one which is not dependent on anything. And Sarva Tantra means all these systems. Tantra here, does it mean Tantra? It means systems. So all these philosophies, he is a sovereign expert on all these philosophies. So Vachaspati Mishra, it also, the word Brihaspati also comes from that one who is the Lord of speech. He's just so eloquent in his philosophy that he's probably, this is probably a title given to him. Brih also means speech. Bruhi, Arjuna asks Krishna, and me bruhi sunishchitam, tell me what to do conclusively. So Vach, Brih, Vachaspati, Brihaspati, they're all titles. And then finally, the text that I've taken a lot of information from is Swami Hariharanandaranya's text. It was written in Sanskrit. It was again a sub-commentary of Vyasa's work. Vachaspati Mishra also wrote a sub-commentary, and Swami Hariharanandaranya also wrote a sub-commentary in Sanskrit, and then it was converted, it was translated into English by P.N. Mukherjee. And this was maybe Swami Hariharananda Aranya. He lived in the late 1800s. And P.N. Mukherjee did the translation in 1940. So the English should be a little very British style English, but still it is profound text. So Swami Hariharananda Aranya, the reason why his text a lot of people consider extremely authentic is because he was a practicing yogi. He was so the name Aranya, so that is one of the Dashanami orders. Swami, he belongs to one of the 10 Dashanami. Dasha means 10. Dashanami means the 10 orders set up by Shankaracharya. They are the Bharati, Saraswati, Sagara, Tirtha, Puri, Ashrama, Giri, Parvata, Aranya, and Vana. So these are the 10 orders he set up. So Swamiji comes in that tradition, and he especially focused on Sāṃkhya. And apparently he has the direct link to Sāṃkhya all the way to Kapila Muni, the person who codified the who expounded Sāṃkhya. This is not the Kapila of Bhagavatam. Kardama and Devahuti's son, who is the incarnation of Bhagavan Vishnu himself. It's not the Kapila, this is a different Kapila. So this work is considered very important because he was a practicing yogi and an expert Sāṃkhya scholar. And we'll come to Sāṃkhya in just a second. Okay, and this is how the okay, let's go to this later. I will give a little bit of background for the Yoga Sutras, and then I'll tell how it is arranged. Now, the yoga comes, it is a philosophy, right? It is called a darshana. Drishti means a view, sight. So darshana means a way of looking at things, which is a philosophy. There are 6 āstika darśanas. Āstika means that which believes in the Vedas. So those who accept the authority of the Vedas and traditional beliefs are orthodox darśanas. So the 6 darshanas, we don't know which one is the earliest. Some people say Sāṃkhya, some people say Purva Mīmamsa. So Mīmamsa means a reverential inquiry. That's how Swami Sarvapriyananda talks about Mīmamsa as a reverential inquiry. Purva Mīmamsa means the early portion of the reverential inquiry, which is the Vedas, and Uttara Mīmamsa is the latter portion of the reverential inquiry, which is called Vedanta. Now, Purva Mīmamsa is all about rituals, various karma kanda of the Vedas, Vedic duties, what should be done, what actions lead to dharma, to results, to heavens, all that. And the person who codified this is a person called Jaimini. Then Sāṃkhya. Sāṃkhya is considered one of the oldest darshanas. It is very close to Vedanta. For those who have been studying Vedanta, it's extremely close. That's why kind of Shankaracharya, he established Vedanta as especially Advaita Vedanta as the highest discipline, as in terms the golden truth. Every other thing has certain things which don't match. Therefore, he established the Uttara Mīmamsa or Vedanta as the Advaita Vedanta as the ultimate truth. And in that, to do so, he argued and he justified and debated against Sāṃkhya to show there are certain things with Sāṃkhya which are not quite true. And this is Sāṃkhya and Vedanta, they're almost true, which is why Shankaracharya said after the debate, he said, oh my God, this is a Malyuddha. It's a wrestler, the biggest Malyuddha. So it was that difficult. Sāṃkhya, Vedanta, in fact, huge portion, it borrows directly from Sāṃkhya. Sāṃkhya talks about the evolution, everything, and Sāṃkhya in its original form is Nirishvara Sāṃkhya. There is no need for God. There is only Purusha and Prakriti, and there are many Purushas. Whereas in Vedanta, there's only one Purusha called Brahman. And these Purushas, they're all pervading. Then Sankhya is the theory, how to attain liberation, all that. And it was the Sutrakara was Kapila, and yoga is the practical aspect. So theory is Sankhya, how to do it is yoga. So for example, you would have attended chemistry class where they talk about acid plus base. When you mix, it is salt and water. That's all great, but then how do you mix all that? There are procedures to do that. You don't pour acid over water because it can splash. There are all these things, right? Yoga talks about how to put this theory into practice so you get liberation. And you have to work with a very difficult agent, and that agent, it's not acid here, it is the mind. So yoga does that, and the Sutrakara is Patanjali. Then there is Nyaya, which is logic, and Vaisheshika, which is metaphysics. Gautama and Kanada are the Sutrakaras. Finally comes Vaisheshika is very famous for its atomistic theory. The physical universe is composed of anu, which combine to form material objects, and there are 4 types of atoms. All these things they talk about. Vedanta supersedes all the other darshanas in that it borrows from all these philosophies and presents a holistic view of the Vedas, especially the end portion. Okay, so if you're interested in the difference between yoga and Vedanta, I can later send you a link so that you have the difference exactly. So there's a article which talks about very small differences. So sometimes when you're studying the Yoga Sutras, you will see certain things as be a little different, but it's almost the same. For all practical purposes, they're one and the same. Finally, so Uttara Mimamsa means the latter portion. It is the Sutrakara's Veda Vyasa. He did the famous sutras, the 555 Brahma Sutras on the Veda, the Upanishads. Okay, all right, then. So traditionally, they're considered 3 pairs of sisters. Sāṃkhya and Yoga go very together. Or if you want to be gender neutral, 3 pairs of siblings. You can pick whatever you want. Sāṃkhya and Yoga go together. Nyaya and Vaisheshika, they just interleave together. And then Purva Mimamsa, they're friendly sisters. So you see, Sāṃkhya Yoga, Nyaya and Vaisheshika, friendly sisters. But Purva Mimamsa and Vedanta, Uttara Mimamsa, they're quarreling sisters. Why? Purva Mimamsa is all about rituals. They tell you to stay in the world. How do you attain heaven? And then how do you come back? How do you come back to earth? That doesn't talk about that, but it tells how to go to heaven. It tells how to get dharma, all those things. But the end goal is a trap into samsara. Whereas Vedanta says how to get out of samsara. So they are quarreling. So in the Bhagavan, also in the Bhagavad Gītā, there's a very famous shloka in the 9th chapter. Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam shine punye martya lokam vishanti yevam trayi darpamanu prapanna gata gatam kama kama labante. So these people, like this, you see in the airports, a revolving door. So they go in, and it's cold outside, they go in, come out, go in, come out, like that. They go to heaven, and once all the shine punya, all the punya has exhausted, they come back to earth again, cycle. So that's why Vedanta, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, which is Vedanta, they are quarreling sisters. Okay, now yoga is the art and science of stilling the mind. All our experience, pain, pleasure, everything is through the mind. So what yoga says, we're going to see that in a moment, is that it says that you, the you who's experiencing everything, is neither the body and not even the mind. Mind is just like so if you think about this, let's say you're doing some chemistry experiments, you're wearing a goggles, and you have protective wear, right? So the body is like your lab coat, and the goggles is like the mind. So when the goggle is cloudy or scratched, you can't see well. That's exactly how it is. But you are intact. You can get a new goggles. You can or you can work and polish, remove the scratches or defog, do all that. And the same thing is with the mind. You can work with the mind and shape it into whichever way you want. And the law of karma says once the lab coat is worn out, you throw it and get a new lab coat. So that is how we get another body. But the mind also, the imprints, they travel from Janma to Janma. And this is talked about extensively in the 4th chapter on Kaivalya, that is liberation. Very, very extensively. Okay, now it is very important to follow a traditional interpretation. In fact, Shankaracharya, he famously says in his Bhagavad Gītā Bhashyam, one who's not versed in the traditional lineage called Sampradaya, even if that person is a knower of all scriptures, is to be disregarded like a fool. The scriptures use language that's very subtle, often contradictory on the surface, highly symbolic. And the reason it is done in a way is that they didn't want this knowledge to go to people who are not ready. So it is very prone to misinterpretation. For example, the word Swamiji, my teacher, Paramarthananda Saraswati, he uses this example. Aja. Ajaha means the unborn. Ajaha also means a goat. So which one would you use? It's highly contextual. Therefore, you should never use a dictionary to get the meaning. Dictionary is helpful, but you should know the context, which is why a guru is needed, which is why a sampradaya is needed. So a lot of the recent books, nowadays everybody is writing, because yoga is very popular due to this asana practice. Everybody wants to know more about yoga, and therefore a lot of people are writing books, but unfortunately the meanings sometimes are totally off. So a traditional interpretation is very, very important. And as I said, there are many commentaries and sub-commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. So I said that there's this article, if you want, you can take a look at it, on the various recommended texts on the Yoga Sutras. So the gold standard is Vyasa. There are other people who also wrote commentaries, but Vyasa's is considered the official commentary. And then the sub-commentaries, the gold standard is Vachaspati Mishra's, most authoritative. And then Vijnana Bhikshu, Raghavananda Saraswati, then Bhaswati, that is the one we are using, Hariharananda Aranya, then Patanjali Yoga Shastra Vivarana. It is written by someone who's called Shankara, but people debate whether it is so, because the style, Shankara has a nonchalant style, Gambhiram and Prasannam, majestic and pleasing, and that is not quite there in this. So it was not, people think it is not written by Adi Shankaracharya. Okay. And now finally the question, who was Patanjali? So Patanjali, when people think of Patanjali, they think of Adishesha's incarnation, Abahu Purusha, Karam, half body of Purusha, person, half body as a snake, Sahasra Shirasam Shvetam, with 1,000 white heads, which is Adishesha. That's all there. That's just a mythological story. But Patanjali was a rishi who lived 2,500 years or even earlier, and he was a Siddha. So the Siddhas, they lived in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, portions of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, mainly in Tamil Nadu. And Siddha means accomplished person. Siddhi means accomplishment. So the Siddhas are very accomplished. Their minds have, due to their yogic powers, they had They attained perfection. Their minds were perfect, and they were very skilled at medicine, especially medicine, grammar, all these things. Agastya was a siddha, and these siddhas, they um, transmitted knowledge like medicine and so many different things. And Patanjali is known for his treatise on Sanskrit grammar, and also his commentary on the Charaka Samhita, one of the principal texts on Ayurveda. So therefore he is known to have excelled in yoga, Sanskrit, and also in medicine. So if you see this picture, so Patanjali is there are many temples where there's idols of Patanjali in South India, ancient temples. The most famous one is Chidambaram. Chidambaram is a ancient and one of the most famous temples where Shiva is presented in the Akasha form, space. And there are some temples, Arunachala temple, there he's in the fire form, Agni. So the 5 elements, Vayu, Jalam, Agni, then Akasha, space, all these, and all these different temples have a speciality. So in Chidambaram, he is in the form of space, and Shiva is just a cosmic dance. So Patanjali and another Nayanmar, his name is Vyagrapada. Vyagrapada means one who has the feet of a tiger. So he was wandering through jungles to pick all these flowers to worship Shiva, and he was constantly getting pricked by thorns. So he prayed to Shiva to convert his feet to that of a tiger so he can walk. This is just a symbolism or a story, mythology, but he is Vyagrapada. So Patanjali and Vyagrapada, they apparently met at Chidambaram and they saw the darshan of Shiva's cosmic dance. So Patanjali is an actual rishi who lived a long time ago. Okay, all right. Okay, and then how are the Yoga Sutras organized? So the Yoga Sutras, there are 4 chapters. The last chapter, Kaivalya Pada, some people argue it may be added later. Some people say no, it is there, because everything that needs to be taught has been done in the first 3 chapters, and then Patanjali again goes into Kaivalyam, liberation, talks about the mind a lot, and there's a lot of debate also there, where he debates or proves that other philosophies, especially the Nastika philosophies, like the Bauddha philosophies, they were at that point of time, they were challenging all the Vedic philosophies. Therefore, he disputes all of them by way of explaining the mind. Patanjali goes, or whoever wrote this chapter, goes into great detail to explain the mind. And by way of that, he disputes other philosophies. So that's the Kaivalya Pada. Then Samādhi Pādaḥ is the first one, which we are going to study. There, Patanjali defines the yoga practice. Then he talks about everything about the mind, the vrittis, then why we need yoga. And then he talks about meditation, introduction, and advanced states of samadhi. It's called Raja Yoga. Then in the Sadhana Pada, which is the practice. So samadhi is the advanced state of meditation. Sadhana is practice, which is the most common or relevant. This chapter is studied by most people because it's very relevant for our day-to-day lives. It talks about the foundation for Ashtanga Yoga and about the Purusha, Prakriti, all this. And it talks about kleshas, why we suffer, the avidya kshetramuttaresham prasuptatanu vichinnodharanam. Ignorance is the gold medal winner of all the mental difficulties. So, Patanjali explains the first 5 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga till Pratyahara. And then in Vibhuti Pada, Vibhuti means glories, superpowers. So, or it's also called Siddhi. So last 3 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are talked about. and Patanjali talks about siddhis. Now, people will ask, why are all these siddhis talked about? The reason is the Yoga Sutras is like a scientific document. So this you have to remember. So I will send an article later. You probably have seen this. Generally, people consider the following as two authoritative texts on Yoga Shastras. One is the Bhagavad Gītā. Second is the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. They differ in their flavor. One is a poetry, lot of repetition, whereas in a sutra style, sutra has a certain styles to follow. Anagdiktam, all these things. Saravat, Vishvato Mukham, and its essence. Saram means essence. Vishvato Mukham means all encompassing. So when it's all encompassing, so there are these asteyam, anagdiktam, there should be no doubts when you study this. So it has to follow these 6 or 7 points. One of them is Vishvato Mukham. All aspects has to be said, which also includes siddhis. But Patanjali gives a warning. He talks about all the superpowers. He says, Te samadau upasarga vyuttane siddhayaha. In this world of mortals, they think of these as superpowers, as glorious, but they are actually obstacles to samadhi if you get stuck in them. So if you come up with siddhis, just let it go. So Vibhuti Pada, and then finally Kaivalya Pada, which talks about Janma, Karma, and Moksha, liberation from the cycle of samsara. Okay. All right. With this, we will look at the first chapter. So the first chapter talks about the, let's go to here, the mind and its fluctuations. That is covered. It's a first portion. Then the nature of the yoga practice and an introduction to the 2 types of samadhi, samprajñāta, asamprajñāta. And then Patanjali talks about the concept of Ishvara. So this is one of the differences from Sāṃkhya. Sāṃkhya in its true form is Nirishvara Sāṃkhya. There's no Ishvara. And here, later some people in Sāṃkhya, they started adding Ishvara. That becomes Sa Ishvara Sāṃkhya, Seshvara Sāṃkhya. And here, yoga very conclusively has Ishvara. But Ishvara, they don't talk as a creator or anything. Ishvara is a supreme Purusha, which is an object to still the mind. So, Ishvara Samadhi Siddhi Ishvara Pranidhanat. Samadhi Siddhi, success in meditation comes from surrender to the supreme entity called Ishvara. Then Patanjali talks about various anchors to concentrate the mind. So Swati was talking about this Maitri, Karuna, Mudito, Pekshanam, Sukha Dukkha, Punya, Punya Vishayanam, Bhavanata, Chitta Prasadanam. There are 10 10 shlokas which talk about the various ways to anchor the mind. 8 or 10 shlokas which talk about sutras which talk about this, and the first one is this one. How to use different kind of anchors to still the mind. Characteristics of samadhi and the various types of samadhis in detail. Patanjali talks about in the last 12 shlokas or so. 11 shlokas, 12 shlokas, yeah. Okay, so with this, we will go into the mind and its fluctuations. So I will go a little over time today because we have to cover some sutras. Okay. I'll say a small prayer before we get started for all the lineages of the teachers and these people who have transmitted this information and about the glory of yoga. Vande Gurunam Charanaravinde Sandarshita Swatma Sukhavabodhe Nishreyase Jangalikayamane Samsara Hala Hala Moha Shantyai Abahu Purushakaram Shankha Chakrasidharinam Sahasrashirasam Shvetam pranamami Patanjalim. So this glorifies all the teachers, thanking the teachers for giving this knowledge, which liberates us from samsara like a jungle physician. And it talks especially about Patanjali, who's half body like a person with 1,000 white heads. Sahasra Shirasam Shvetam Pranamami Patanjali. We bow down to Patanjali. Shri Patanjala Yoga Darshanam Atha Samādhi Pādaḥ Atha Yoga Anushasanam. This is the first sutra. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Anushasanam, this word is a important word. Here begins the study of the discipline of yoga. As I said, this is also, everything is packed. Sutras are aphorisms and they're in very packed format. So we will now unpack the sutra. Okay. Atha here implies the commencement of a subject. One of the mistakes people make, especially in modern times, is they say, oh, atha means now. So if you look at the dictionary, one of the meanings is now. So it means being in the present moment. So yoga is being in the present moment. That is a completely wrong interpretation. It signals that the student has completed the necessary prior preparation, which is some relevant purification of the mind, and is now fit to receive the specific instruction. So it is a formal declaration. Here begins the authoritative instruction of yoga. Now so atha is that, atha, commencement of a subject. Now let's unpack the word anushasanam. Anu means to follow. So shas means rule. So in fact, the 14th or the 13th chapter of the Mahabharata, one of the longest chapters, it's Anushasanika Parva. So Yudhishthira, coming after the war, he's coming back to the rule. Anushasana means again the commencing the rule. Shas means rule. Here it means the discipline. So Anushasana means following the discipline of yoga. How following? Shasanam literally means ruling. Here means instruction. Therefore, Anushasana means the instruction that follows the tradition. That's very important. So Patanjali is codifying and systematizing ancient wisdom rather than creating a new philosophy. This is what Vyasa's commentary says. And interestingly, Vyasa's commentary begins with yoga is samadhi. Yoga Samadhi. Vyasa is not beating around the bush. So here, look at how far we've come in the present age. Present day age, people think yoga is all this acrobatics and gymnastics. It has nothing to do with this. Vyasa very clearly says yoga is samadhi. The tradition is apaurisheya, means it is not from any person. It is given by the sages from revelations in their meditation. It is very ancient. Nobody knows when it came. Yoga is there in all the scriptures, Vedas. They all talk about this, as even before all these were even composed. So yoga has been there from time immemorial. Now, now Vyasa classifies people's mind into these 5 categories. Some of them are not quite ready to understand these subtle topics. Shipta is the restless mind, which is naturally restless, has no patience or intelligence necessary for contemplation of Swami Hariharananda calls it a super sensuous subject. That is a very subtle subject, and it cannot comprehend any subtle principle. Through intense envy or malice, such a mind can at times be in a state of concentration, but that is not yogic concentration. Swami Hariharananda very clearly tells this. All these intense states of concentration due to anger or focus due to anger and those kind of things, or greed, these are not yoga. So Shipta, restless mind. Then the Muda mind. It is a stupefied mind. Mudam means just stupid, right? So Muda, stupefied. The mind has no obsession, has obsession or infatuation in a matter connected with the senses. It is unfit to think of subtle principles. It's called a stupefied mind. It is just it's the reason why stupefied is used is that it is not thinking about the right things. It's just going into all the infatuation and other things. Stipta is restless. This one is too much attachment. And then vikshipta, it is sometimes it is restless, sometimes it's concentrated. That's where most of us fall. And slowly this can be moved to ekagra, one pointed, at which point all these principles will become very clear. And finally, the niruddha. So this is the arrested mind. Here, it is completely arrested. Ekagra is one pointed, but it's generally one pointed, but it can also fall off. Ekagra is complete control. Niruddha is complete control, total arrest of the mind from deep samadhi. So Vyasa dismisses the first two, and also he also dismisses the third as not yoga. And Vachaspati Mishra, he adds to that. In these states, the mind is possessed by the enemies, desire, anger, lethargy, where one might focus momentarily, and that focus is not generated by the self's will, but is usually forced by the intensity of an external object. Therefore, it does not count as nirodha, means controlled restriction. You have control. So it is not yoga. So the detailed meaning of Sutra 1, as per Vyasa's commentary, here begins the study of the discipline of yoga, transmitted in accordance, anu, following the ancient lineage for the student whose mind is prepared. Now comes the most famous sutra in the entire Yoga Sutras, which every serious yoga practitioner knows. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Now, yoga is the suppression of the fluctuations of the mind. Vritti. So vritti means the thoughts, the mental chatter. So look at the word vr in Sanskrit. A lot of the words, they're very correlated to the sound. So the word, the pranava mantra, om, also it directly, the vibrations directly of pacify the vagus nerve. So in Sanskrit, the way things are pronounced also has its meaning. So vr means literally it's like a whirlpool. So it is all these thoughts like a whirlpool in the mind. So in this sutra, the interesting thing is that yoga is just saying suppressions of the fluctuations of the mind. Does Patanjali say yoga chitta sarvavritti nirodha? Does he say? He does not say. He does not say it is a suppression of all the fluctuations of the mind. So this is a common question which is asked all over again and again. In yogic state, that means the mind, if the mind is not completely still, there are no thoughts, then it's not yoga. No, sometimes the mind can be completely nirbija samadhi. Patanjali will talk about that. There's no seed, nothing, so it's completely still. But there are samprajñāta samadhi where you focus on certain things. In fact, all the samyamas, they're all about focusing on certain aspects. So the word sarva, or all, being absent, that is suppressions of all modifications of the mind, have not been referred to. So yoga is intended to include samprajñāta samadhi, that is wisdom that comes from meditation, even though it involves some mental activity, though it is pure and refined. This is still yoga. Okay, so yoga It is these thoughts that there can be thoughts in the mind, but they are not the vrittis, the ones that they just suck you away. It is a very controlled and refined thoughts. That's in samadhi states, you can still have that. So this is a very important distinction, and Swami Hariharananda very clearly mentions that. So nirodha, look at this. Nirodha. It's like a hard word, right? It is generally means wiping out. Here it's used in the context of restraint. So this is why you can't read a dictionary and come up with this. There are all these subtleties. It means restraint of the fluctuations of the mind. Even though I've written suppressions of the fluctuations, it is more used in the connotation of restraint. Imply it in the last sutra of chapter 1. Tasyapi nirode sarpa nirodan nirbija samadhi. So all these samadhis, they're used to clean out the impurities, like a broom used to clean. All the gross dust is gone. So you have the broom that is there. And then comes the final samadhi, nirbija samadhi. Even that broom is thrown out. So that is the nirodha means wiping out of all the impressions. So nirodha is not nothingness. It means the Swami Hariharananda, he corrects a misunderstanding that cessation means a blank or a void or sleep. No, he explains nirodha as a dynamic state. It's a specific kind of effort. The mind naturally wants to flow out due to rajas. Nirodha is the flow of the mind turning back towards the source. Okay. So all these are from Swami Hariharananda's interpretation. Okay. Now we will come to the mind screen. So we've talked about the mind. Now yoga, in great detail, it explains the mind. So the mind has different, let's see. Okay. So it's worth for you, if you have not done that, to take a look at the these slides. Okay. Now, when you talk about the mind in Western medicine, mind is just like they don't really understand what mind is. They just deal with the brain, because Western medicine only goes with things that you can see. In yoga, we deal with the sukshma shariram, which is by nature, it is subtle and not visible to the senses. So that's why Western medicine cannot explain, or science itself cannot explain a lot of things. But in yoga, as well as in Vedanta, and Vedanta here borrows everything entirely from Veda. The mind has four, Vedanta borrows everything entirely from yoga. The mind has four parts: mano, buddhi, ahankara, chitta. Manas is memory and feelings distributed throughout the body. Manaha, so when say, oh, manasu kashtama, in Tamil they say manasu kashtama, they point to the heart. Mano bhara hai. So it's like they point to the heart, right? So it is distributed throughout the body, memory and feelings. Buddhi is the intellect. So you can associate it with the prefrontal cortex. In fact, there is a very famous mantra in the Kathopanishad of the charioteer example. So the chariot is like the body. It's drawn by the horses, which are like the sensors. The rein, that is the mind. The buddhim to saratim viddhi, the charioteer who controls these horses, is the intellect. And then atmanam rathinam viddhi, atma, that is the consciousness. It is the lord of the chariot, sitting, just seeing nothing, doing nothing. And just because the Lord is there, the chariot moves. If the Lord is not there, chariot doesn't move. Why should it move? Why would the charioteer drive? So manas, then buddhi is the prefrontal cortex from scientific point of view. Then ahankara. Ahankara, it is, so the way it's a different, it's a sense of I. It tells you how to, your locate, your, how you're related to the world, your placement with respect to the world. It is not a bad thing, even though there's no um, exact English word. You can say ego, but in English, ego is used in a context of being bad. But ahankara can also be, if it's not placed right, it false sense of I, thinking I am great, I am this. It can cause, it's a bad thing. But ahankara just means a sense of I. So this, in strict Vedantic terms, it is a reflection of the consciousness on the mind. We'll come to that later. And then finally comes the most subtle one. It is called chitta. Remember, this is different from chit. Chit and chitta are different. Chit is consciousness. Sat, chit, anandam. Sat, existence, consciousness, bliss. Chit is consciousness. Chitta is the portion of the mind. It is the closest link to consciousness. In fact, it's called chittiva bhavayati chittam. This seems to trick you into thinking, I am that mind, I am the chitta. That's why chittiva bhavayati means it appears like the consciousness, but it's actually, we'll see all this is in great detail talked about in the last chapter, the reflected consciousness. And that's what gives the sense of ahankara, all this. In Vedanta especially, it's talked about in great detail. In the Yoga Sūtras also, in the 4th chapter, Patanjali talks about it in great detail, or whoever wrote that chapter. Behind all this is chit, or the original consciousness. It is called Purusha. It is also called Sakshi Tattvam, or the witness principle. It doesn't do anything. It's like electricity giving and lighting up the entire machine, but it doesn't do anything. So I give the example of an apple sorting machine. The apple, it looks at, if there's some brown thing on the apple, it rejects the apple. Then if it's good, it places in a different container. Now, without the electricity, it won't work. But can you say the apple, the electricity is the one which is doing this? No, electricity powers, but it is not the doer. So this is subtle. That's why the Purusha is akarta and abhokta. Because it's not the doer, it does not reap any karma also. So Atma is pure. Okay. These are all some very subtle principles. Now we come to the mind. Okay. So chitta, this is one portion of the mind. Patanjali talks about yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. Chitta, you can think of it like a movie theater. In fact, the Patanjali uses the word pratyaya. Pratyaya is the contents of the screen, or you can't say the contents of the speakers, but it's the sound and the images, everything, all the contents of the mind. Essentially, that's a pratyaya. Okay, images, all that. So it's the contents of the screen and the speakers. Purusha is the light from the projector. Also, Purusha is the screen on which you are doing. It's the background. So it can be a little confusing. Purusha is both the light, and it's also the projecting medium on which everything is projected. Okay. So that is the analogy of the mind. So chitta is the movie theater. And in this movie theater, there is the images, sound, everything. That is the pratyaya. And then there is the Purusha. Purusha is the constant parts of the movie theater. Anything that is not changing, you can immediately say that's Purusha. So if somebody gives you a quiz, okay, now I have this analogy of Purusha and the mind to this and this and this. Now you tell me which is Purusha, which is Prakriti, immediate, or which is the mind. Mind belongs to Prakriti. Anything that changes is Prakriti. Purusha doesn't change. Light is constantly that shining. Light go the next. I'll go to the next slide. You see, in those days they had this reel film, right? These days nobody, everything is digital, DLP. So imagine this film going from the senses, it's moving in one direction. Then from memory, it's going, especially when you dream, it's from memory, the roll is moving in the other direction. Now it's moving this way and moving the other way. The light is constant. light goes through this film and it falls on the screen. So the reflection on the screen is called the reflected consciousness or Chidabhasa, which Patanjali talks about later. But this is what gives motion, all this thing, because through the senses, everything, light shines through that, and the whole thing is witnessed by the mind. Okay, so this is the state of the mind. Chitta, the movie theater screen of the mind. Okay, so mano, buddhi, ahankara, chitta. Chit iva bhaveti chittam. Chitta seems to manifest like the original consciousness and causes a lot of confusion. That is why we think we are the mind. We are not even the mind. So Vyasa, famous opening statement, yoga is samadhi. It implies that yoga is essentially a deep state of meditation. So I jokingly put these slides in previously. This is before 1980, before when I was like very young. Then generally yogi, when they say, the image that comes is somebody with a lot of power over their prana, siddhis, and generally the image that immediately would come in my mind is somebody sitting in meditation. Yogi, man, woman, whoever it is, it's just yogi. But now it's all this. It's nothing to do with yoga. So that's quite unfortunate, but that's how things have changed between then and now. Okay. All right. Then comes. Okay. All right. So I'll go take a few more minutes because we started late due to the introductions. Tadatrashtuhu swarupe vastanam. Tada means then. Drashta means the seer. Drashtuhu means of the seer. Drashtuhu, for the seer, of the seer. Drashtuhu. Then for the seer, there is abidement in the own nature. Or you can say the seer then abides in the own nature. So look at the word drashtuhu, means for the seer, swarupe avasthanam, there is abidement in swarupam, swarupe, in its own true nature. So seer then abides in its own true nature. Now you can, avasthana means abidance, establishment, swarupa means true nature. So what do you mean by establishment in true nature? So the way in yoga philosophy it is done is that the mind sees only what's projected on the screen. If the projection is all these images from the senses or the memory, then you don't see the pure consciousness. You don't see the pure light. The pure consciousness is the impartial witness of the mind, and the mind appears to it as an object. The complete cessation of these fluctuations is the state of kaivalya. In nirodha, the suppression of the mind is for a temporary period, while in kaivalya, the mind disappears, never to appear again. So this swarupam is when all these vrittis are gone, and this entire light is plainly reflecting off the screen. That is swarupam. So that is your true nature without all these additions from the senses or from the memory. Okay. In nirodha, there can also be, we also thought there can be directed thoughts. So the seer is the consciousness. Chitta reveals things by appearing to be conscious under the influence of the seer. Chit iva bhavayati chittam. So the seer abides in its own true nature. So what is reflected on the screen is just the pure light. That's what it means. Okay, this is the yogic way of describing, without all these extra things that we saw on the screen. So another example that I think this one is given by either Vyasa or Vachaspati Mishra. So there's a moon, still lake, that's like the mind. Moon is like the Purusha. Again, Every time people ask you, I can give you some to if you want. I can give you all these questions to test understanding or make sure you understand things well. So one of the things a person can ask is, in this example, which is the, so you have the lake and you have the moon. Tell me which is the Purusha and which is the mind. What would you answer? Anybody wants to answer?
The moon is the mind.
And
The Purusha, the lake is the fluctuations. I can see ripples in the water. Probably that refers again to the thoughts and the ripples over there. And the Purusha has to be the sun, where chit iva bhavayati chitta, which means the mind is borrowing its rays from the sun.
yeah, very good. So you went one step further and you included the sun. So that's why analogies fail when if you extend it too much. So you did a great job. But here in this particular example, what Vyasa says is the light from the moon, that is like the Purusha because it's constant. The lake is like the mind because at one time it can be still, another time it can have ripples. So that's all it is here. Okay. So the moon, or you can say the light from the moon, is like a constant. This is just the analogy. Every analogy will break. That's why you can in Vedanta, Purusha or Atma is called aprameyaha, that which is incognizable. No analogy can describe it. So all analogies will break. But yeah, if the one of the questions that asked, but constantly people ask is, if the Purusha is eternal and unchanging, isn't it always established in its own nature? How can it start abiding in the nature only when the mind stops? So Vachaspati Mishra comes to our rescue. He says, while the Purusha never actually changes, its manifestation appears to change on the mind medium. And that's what mind is, what we deal with. And therefore, when the mind is calm, the Purusha reflects clearly. When the mind is active, Vyuttana samskaras, Niruddha samskaras, Vyuttana samskara, the Purusha is obscure. So the concept of reflected consciousness, when the reflected consciousness is pure, untainted by the modification of the reflecting medium, it is said the seer or the consciousness, or more particularly, the reflected consciousness, it abides in itself, abides in the Purusha. Okay, so the pratyaya, the contents of the screen of the mind, is clean. Then the Purusha is reflected. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. Sa rupam means form. Sa rupam means like a form like. Sa rupyam means likeness or similarity. So at other times, itaratra, at other times when not in samadhi, the seer appears to assume the form of the vrittis. So the lake appears to assume the form of the fluctuations. The entire lake looks like choppy because of the modifications of the mind. Vrittis, the modifications of the mind. Okay, seer assumes the form of the vrittis. So the moon now looks like the vrittis. You see that? The seer, vrittis are open, etc. Otherwise, the seer assumes the form of the moon. Sorry, the seer assumes the form of the lake. Moon assumes the form of the ripples in the lake. Another example given by Vachaspati Mishra for Sarupyam is a pure crystal. This comes again and again. Chinavitte abhijatasya mane grihita grihanagrahyeshu that's atanjanata samapattihi. Vachaspati Mishra uses this for Sarupyam. When you bring a red flower, the entire crystal appears red. The crystal is pure. Another classic example from Atma Bodha is an iron ball. That's the mind. Mind, by definition in yoga and Vedanta, it is inert. It's dull, like an iron ball. It is jata porul. The jata means it is inert. Inert, lusterless iron ball. When you put it in fire, it just glows. So glowing, the fire is the consciousness. And now the iron ball seems to come to life when in the presence of consciousness. This is an example from Atma Bodha, Shankaracharya's Atma Bodha. Vrittaya panchatayah klishta klishtaha. Now the vrittis fall into 5 varieties, of which some are klishta, producing harm, and the rest are aklishta, not producing harm. So it's not klishta, it is klishta. Klishta means klishta, aklishta becomes klishta, klishta. When one word ends with the other word starts with then it becomes So klishta. Okay. Now, one of the questions that commonly, so we will look at the 5 vrittis. One of the questions people will say is, the 5 mental thoughts or patterns, vrittis. You are saying, next Patanjali will tell what the 5 vrittis are. But in Vedanta, we've studied avasthatrayam. The mind is in 3 states: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti avastha. Jagrat means waking state, Swapna is dream state, Sushupti means deep sleep. So this is not used in that context. This is looking at all the thought modifications. In fact, I will come to that. In yoga, the dream and as well as daydreaming or recollecting from the memory, they are one and the same. It's just called smriti, that vritti. So they don't distinguish swapna and smriti. So when you recollect from memory, it is that thought pattern, whether you are in dream or actively recollecting or daydreaming, whatever it is still smriti. We'll next. Okay, before that, the vrittis, the latent impressions, are left by mental processes, which lead to misery, as well as those which lead to freedom. So these vrittis, mental modifications, they leave impressions, the karma. So the karma is essentially our samskaras, latent impressions, the memory traces, and when they get activated and manifest, they become vritti. So this is the cycle. Latent impressions are left by mental processes, right? And these lead to misery as well as to freedom. So this is because the question will come, okay, if there is a vritti, I'm thinking about something, I'm thinking a bad thought, how to steal money. Why would it cost me? It's just a thought. Why would it cause problems? You will ask. Then the way yoga explains this vritti, it leaves an impression, goes into your samskara, and later that will cause you to do a bad action, and it will manifest and it'll cause problems. That is why it is klishta, aklishta, depending on the kind what you think. These latent impressions give rise to the fluctuations of the mind. So it is all coming from the samskaras. That is why in Vedanta, they give the example of seed, right? Seed always sprouting things. So roasting the seed, just removing all the samskaras. That is the ultimate in samadhi before kaivalya. That's what happens. If any of the afflictions cause a fluctuation or modification of the mind, then it's called a klishta vritti. It is so called because the impressions that is left behind such a modification produce a afflicted mental state. They produce kleshas. Later in the 2nd chapter, Patanjali will talk about the 5 kleshas: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Fluctuations, whether harmful or beneficial, gives rise to latent impressions of the corresponding nature. So these are called samskaras. The retention of these experience is called samskaras, or latent impressions. Okay, so I think we can stop here. I'll stop the recording.